Hello, everybody around the world. My name is Stefan Schweinfest. I'm the director of the UN Statistics Division, and I must warn you, I must be one of the happiest person in the world today. So many exciting things happening at the same time. We have our World Data Forum. This session is part of it. Today is also World Statistics Day, so happy World Statistics Day to everybody around the globe. And of course, I have the incredible privilege and pleasure of launching one of our biggest flagship products of the UN Statistics Division, the World's Women 2020 publication that we prepare every 5 years. So welcome everybody. I'm also very happy because I have a phenomenal panel to discuss today. Let me quickly introduce to you. I'm very privileged to have, of course, with me Francesca Grum. She's our chief of the Social and Gender Statistics section of the United Nations Statistics Division. And she, of course, oversees the global gender statistics program in our house. And she is the main responsible for this phenomenal product. Of course, World's Women, Trends and Statistics. Of course, it's her and her team. And let me take this opportunity to thank her and the team for this great work. The second person I have the privilege to introduce is Ms. Marjut Pietiläinen. I always thought I had a complicated last name, but Marjut, I think you beat me. She is a senior researcher of Statistics Finland. We know Statistics Finland has always been a lead in gender equality, so we are particularly pleased to have Statistics Finland as a co-chair of our interagency and expert group on gender statistics together with Japan. So she is the team lead in Statistics Finland on gender, and she's also a statistical correspondent of the she figures in the European Commission. I will not read the entire bios because you can go to our webpage on World Data Forum and you'll find a lot more information on our great panelists. The third one is a dear friend and statistical superman, Mr. Julio Santaella, the president of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography in Mexico. I should get that right because it is really one of the very few offices in the world where statistics and geography is together, and you'll get a taste of that today. And Julio has been an old friend. He has so many functions and roles in the international statistical community that I would fill the whole hour if I wanted to mention them all. So just thanks, Julio, for being here with us today. And our last speaker is Mrs. Carmel Terburg. She is the lead account manager of nonprofit and global organization team of Environmental Systems Research Institute, or much better known as our friends from ESRI. I mean, and she has been a really old friend or long-standing friend. Carmel, I didn't say old, long-standing friend of our division and our program, and she's over 25 years of experience working with GIS. Of course, she started working when she was 5 years old, and her main responsibilities are in urban management, humanitarian assistance, food security, and sustainable resource management. She has been one of the greatest link between us and the private sector, between the program of geospatial information and sustainable development. So thank you for that. So today it's all about our World's Women publication, the 2020. You already see the front cover there. We are launching it today in this August community. And it is, of course, a product, a collaboration like anything we do at the UN with many countries and many partners. And let me just really thank everybody who worked with us on this. It's a beautiful UN product in the sense, and it's a fun product. It is very innovative, principles of open data, trusted data. It's geo-referenced, and we'll talk about this quite a lot. And it's not a static product. It is an innovative product. We will be able to update it. And it's really fun to read because, I mean, you can create your own book. It's an online product. You can create your own pathway to what you're interested in by topics or by regions, whichever way. you wanted. Francesca always says we unpack the beauty of gender statistics and gender data, and I think that's the best way of putting it. It's even playful with cards, but before I get lost in the description, I should turn over the microphone to the lady who really knows all about it, the woman, Francesca Groom, our lead author on this. So thanks again, Francesca, to your team. And the floor is yours for introducing this product.
Thank you so much, Stefan, and greetings to everyone from New York. Before I share with you some of the key findings of our latest assessment of progress toward gender equality, let me say a few words about this new format that Stefan already provided an overview about. So first of all, this edition, the 7th edition, is a collection of 100 short stories covering the status of women compared to men in key gender dimensions under the 6 critical areas of global policy concern that you can see on the right side of the screen. As mentioned before, we didn't do it all by ourselves. Of course, we partnered closely with 14 member states and 16 international agencies and regional commissions. And I'm very grateful to all of our partners, knowing that some of you are actually with us this morning, because you really help us in enriching the assessment by bringing new and different angles to the gender analysis. But let me move fast into what we learned about the state of gender equality. Of course, given that we only have a few minutes, I'll share with you just the top of the iceberg, or just a slice of the information that is available as of today through the 100 gender data stories available in the portal. So starting with women's representation in power and decision-making position, one of the key global indicators that we keep monitoring, of course, is the representation of women in national parliaments. And as of today, 1 out of 4 parliamentarians is a woman. This is considered a progress compared to 1995, when only 1 out of 10 parliamentarians was a woman, but of course we are very far from reaching the milestone of 50%, the gender parity milestone, that, by the way, as of today has only been achieved in 5 countries. If we move to women's in the corporate world, the progress has been quite slow. And as of today, women represent less than 30% of managers at the global level, corresponding to a minimal progress since 1995. So we can see sort of stagnation. And if we go at the top level of managerial positions, and we look at the chief executive officers as an indicator, we find that as of 2020, only 7% of Fortune 500 corporations have a female chief executive officers. But of course, global numbers and global averages mask the reality of women and girls in regions and in countries. And for example, if we move from global numbers to a region like Latin America and Caribbean, we see that the story is quite different. So this is a region where women's legal rights have improved significantly over the decades, and where we find that women hold, on average, almost 1/3 of parliamentary seats. So again, far from 50, but higher than the global average. And by the way, it's Latin America has one of the highest averages across the regions in the world. And this is the region also where we find that women hold around 40% of managerial positions. If we zoom in and we look at what are the progress, what happened in the region, we can see that, for example, there was a 10 percentage point increase in women candidates in parliamentary elections, and many of the countries in the region also adopted legislative gender quotas. And as a result, we find when we look at the top 10 countries in terms of women's representation in national parliaments, 5 of the top 10 countries are actually in Latin America and the Caribbean. And if we further zoom in and we look at the country level, I'd like to highlight Mexico, where since 2019, gender equality has been achieved in both chambers of parliament. So overall, government interventions through targeted policies and legal measures, such legislative gender quotas, seem to have improved women's representation in key positions of power in both the public and private spheres. However, women are still far from having an equal voice as men, and their representation is still too low for women to influence policymaking effectively. And with the current pandemic, there is a need to ensure that women are decision makers with a voice equal to that of men when responses to the present crisis and future crises are decided. Moving to a different chapter, also covered by many of the stories presented in the World Women 2020 portal, and looking at violence against women, data show that on average around 80% of women worldwide, regardless of their income, age, or education, have experienced physical and or sexual violence by an intimate partner in the past 12 months, with wide variations among regions and countries. Intimate partner violence remains the most common form of violence, but women are also subject to violence from other abusers. Although in most cases, women are familiar with the perpetrator. For instance, looking at sexual violence, only 6% of women reported that the perpetrator was a complete stranger. On a positive side, if I can say so, there is some progress, or there is some sign of progress over the years, and intimate partner violence is becoming less acceptable. For instance, women's acceptance of wife beating has decreased in almost 75% of countries with trend data. Although, as of today, laws to address domestic violence are not universally available, with only 82% of countries with such laws. But let me tell you a different part of the story, because if we only look at prevalence of violence, we don't get the full picture. What we really need to do is to dig into the data and look at other critical dimensions like frequency and severity of violence. For instance, in Kazakhstan, while we see that 5% of women experience intimate partner violence in the past 12 months, that's a prevalence that is lower when we compare it to the global average. When we consider this other dimension, their experience of violence is quite extreme. 57% of women reported frequent episodes of violence and severe violence, meaning punching and kicking. And women in Kazakhstan also confirm the evidence that we have at the global level that points to the fact that most women never talk to anyone about the violence they are subject to. In fact, more than half never told anyone. And among those who told someone, only 8% reported the violence to the police, and 3% reported to a doctor or health worker. So overall, violence against women remains a global concern, difficult to measure and monitor due to the sensitivity of the topic. And of course, we should also remember that the COVID-19 pandemic represents an additional challenge, as many women and girls around the world have been isolated in unsafe environments due to the lockdown imposed in response to the pandemic, and they are at increased risk of experiencing intimate partner violence. Moving to my last slide and talking about women's economic empowerment, there are a few key indicators that I like to cover and show some of the results with you. As of 2020, of course, starting with the labor force participation, as of 2020, less than 50% of women of working age participate in the labor market, compared to around 75% of men, resulting in a significant gender gap of 27 percentage points globally. And this is similar to what we observed in 1995, indicating stagnation in women's access to paid work. The story is also quite different when we zoom in at the regional level, and we find that the participation of women in Southern Asia, Northern Africa, and Western Asia is all below 30%, also with significant gender differences of around 50 percentage points. These are, by the way, the regions where unequal rights in employment and discriminatory attitudes towards women engaging in paid labor are still very prevalent. Another indicator that we keep monitoring and that goes in tandem with the labor force participation is the time women spend on unpaid domestic and care work, meaning the time women spend taking care of the children, of older persons, time spent on cleaning, cooking for their family. And the evidence keeps showing that on an average day, women spend about 3 times as many hours on these types of activities as men. And if we focus now on women who are in the labor force, this unpaid work really translates in a second full-time job. And we find many of these women in part-time work to balance between their work and family responsibilities. This is particularly the case evident in Europe, in Western Europe, for instance, where 57% of employed women are in part-time jobs. And this actually partially explains the observed gender pay gap in the region that stands, based on the latest available data, at around 14%, meaning that for every 100 euro earned by men, women in Europe make 86 euros only. Finally, looking at the occupations where women concentrate or overrepresent men, we find that 88% of personal care workers and 69% of health professionals are women, while on the other hand, only 1 in 5 ICT professionals and almost 30% of science and engineers professionals are women. This type of analysis by occupation is actually very important, particularly now in the context of measuring the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, since many women work in economic sectors and occupations that cannot be carried out remotely through teleworking and that require physical and human interaction, not allowed, of course, during lockdown periods. And of course, we also need to keep in mind that women representing 69% of the health professionals are also facing higher infection risks than men in the workplace, knowing that they are on the front lines in the battle against the pandemic. So overall, for this chapter, we found stagnation, mainly due to the combination of discriminatory social norms, unequal legal rights, and unequal distribution of unpaid work that together still hold back or restrain women from their full economic potential. I think I'm going to stop here from the release of key findings because I want to share with you quickly, take another couple of minutes, if I'm able. I want to show you the new portal for the World Women 2020. So I'm going to stop sharing And I'm gonna share again, but a different page. Give me just a couple of minutes. Here it is. I hope you can see it. So this is the new face. You recognize the land page that we also used as the background for our session. Quickly, once you land in the page, that by the way is available as of now through the launch, you get a quick, short explanation of what it is about and what is new in this new in the 2020 edition of the publication. You can also get some of the key stories available for you to explore. If you scroll down, you get access to the dashboard with the key numbers behind the World's Women 2020. And keeping scrolling down, you have the option to navigate and explore the 100 stories through the different chapters, the 6 key gender concerns that we focus on for this edition. There is also easy access to the stories related to COVID from the land page, and I hope that you take the time to discover the latest numbers and the latest assessment of the impact of COVID. And scrolling down, you get the opportunity to navigate and explore the stories by region. And this is something very powerful, because by moving away from a book and by unpacking the stories into these short 100 stories that are queryable. And now, if you click, for example, on Sub-Saharan Africa or on any other region, you will be brought to a dedicated page that gives you the result or the summary of all the relevant analyses and numbers from the 100 stories pulled together into a one page. So this is quite powerful, and we believe that will be useful and appreciated by many of the users. And one last word on the data. Of course, this is all about data. Each of the story is based on a wealth of information stored in around 170 data sets that have been classified or packaged under the 6 thematic areas to make it easier for you as a user to navigate across the different data sets. I'm going to stop here and thank you for your attention. Stefan, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. So whoever said that statistics and statistical publications are boring? I mean, if you are not running for your laptop or computer right now and jumping into that, I don't know what else it would take to make this interesting. So thank you again, Francesca, not only for presenting it, but actually for spending the last year of your life with your team, day and night, of putting it all together. And as usual, there's, and it came through in your presentation, there is always sort of a little emotional duality. On the one hand, we are seeing still the challenges that are ahead. We are still in many areas not quite there. But on the other hand, we can also show with numbers how much progress has already been made and how the numbers actually are sometimes the contributing factor to make people aware, to take action. So I think that's, I guess that's the fundamental essence of our job as statisticians. Of course, all our numbers come from countries. We don't produce any numbers in UN Statistics Division, and I'm very glad now to give the floor to 2 of the countries. We will start with Finland, Marjut, and the floor is yours for a presentation on gender life paths in Finland.
See the presentation already?
We can see your presentation and we can hear you.
Yes, okay, then everything's fine. Well, hello everybody. It's very nice and great to be here. I'm really happy to participate in this panel on the World Statistics Day. I think that, sorry, I skip possibly one slide now. I think I can change the slides now. Well, my topic is gendered life path in Finland, and I'm really happy to be here, and I think that power of data is huge, and data is also superpower for gender equality. The world is full of data, but seeing the gender relevance is not always that obvious. We need to put our gender lenses on and look at the data in the new way. Now I will show you a couple of examples from Finland concerning fertility and families. I hope this will give you an idea what we can see from statistics and what not, and how we can try to impact with gender data. First, let's look at the fertility rate. As you can see, the fertility rate has been declining considerably during the last 10 years. It was in 2009, the fertility rate was 1.9, but now it's already 1.35, the lowest of all times in Finland. This year, the lowering is not that sharp anymore, but we will see what's going to happen in the beginning of next year. We will be wiser what, for example, COVID time has, how it has impact on fertility in Finland. And since 69, the rate has been below the population regeneration rate, and this change has been more huge than in other Nordic countries, even they have the same line as well. Well, let's look at the how the childbearing has postponed in Finland through last decades. In 2019, first-time mothers were older than before, 29.6 years, and fathers 31.6 years. The difference between women and men is about 2 years, and it has remained quite similar last years. And the childbearing was postponed simultaneously as the women's participation in education and labor force participation has increased. And now we have to think about what are the reasons, because we can't explain this only with economical issues. There can be seen some cultural changes and living lifestyle issues as well. And what are the consequences of the low fertility and declining birth rates then? There are challenges in reproduction that do not impact only on young adults and their wishes, on childbearing and number of children. It will also have consequences on grandparenthood and family communities. It will change our societies and population figures, that's for sure. Finland is placed in the middle in the comparison on average age of first-time mothers in EU 2018, and in the Nordic comparison, only in Iceland first-time mothers are younger than in Finland. In the family barometer, compared 2017 compared to men, women mentioned concerns over the career breaks caused by childbearing and employment relationships, during which having a child was seen as unwanted or not appropriate. It has, in addition, a growing proportion of Finnish women and men in typical childbearing age live alone without a spouse, which is a significant factor for postponing or preventing childbearing. On the other hand, the family barometer shows that shares of those women and men who do not wish children at all has grown greatly. But let's look at the childless people aged 40 to 44 years old in Finland by region. We can see that in south, the shares are higher in Uusimaa, which is a capital area. And then in the east side, especially for men, the childless share of childless men is quite high. It's very typical in those areas that education level and also socioeconomic status are lower than in the other regions. And on the other hand, the unemployment is higher. Then we can see on the west side of Finland, Ostrobotnia, you can see the lighter color there. It's in those areas, family sizes are in general larger, and also those areas are typically religious. Well, let's go then to the families of children, and what kind of families children are living, underage children. In our family statistics, children are included in a family based on the dwelling they are registered to. And thus far, you can only be registered at one address. Children who live in two homes, for example, are registered only with one parent. And this is the issue for fathers, remoting fathers who are living elsewhere after divorce, for example. And those are somehow invisible if we look at the family types. If the father who's living in other place, if he does not have a new relationship or a family, he will be outside the family population. And then we have the children who are not living, who are living in the same with the same sex cohabiting couples. They are not seen in this figure, or they are seen wrongly in this figure, because thus far we have not deducted programmatically these same-sex cohabiting couples. And mostly those children are counted, for example, in the family type of mother with children. But then if we want to look at the how the living arrangements then are in life, if we look at those family types according to the register information, it's crucial to look at also the survey data to find out what are the actual living arrangements in families. And in LESA survey 2017, it was asked from children aged 10 to 14, what are their living arrangements, and 73% of children were living with both parents, and 14% were living only with the mother. And shared living equally was 5%, and 6% of children were living mostly with one parent and short times with the other parent, and only 2% of children were living only with the father. Then let's look at the living alone by age in Finland. We can see the color, blue color is for women and green is for men. And we can see that the life cycle for women, it varies more than among men. Young women leave their parents' home quite earlier than boys. But then what's interesting in this picture that the share of men living alone doesn't go that low level as women. It stays about every fourth men in the middle age are living alone, and it's partly because of divorces. And then living alone is very typical for women in old ages because of the life expectancy rates or figures. And I think this shows the problem of remoting fathers quite well. Recently, it has been discussed whether the population information system should allow two official addresses in the system, which is a nice idea. The new Finland's government's action plan for gender equality also mentions this. However, we cannot be sure how families would they record this after all in the population system or not. I also want to point out the importance of the different data sources. With our register-based data, we can form family statistics covering the whole population, but everyday living arrangements stay invisible. Society, families, and living arrangements of families are not stable, and registers are somehow slow to catch up with this. At this point, surveys are crucial. In this way, we can get as good as overall picture of the phenomenon as possible to fill the gaps. I can't help but mention that Statistics Finland is currently conducting a time use survey. The fieldwork is going on, and the results will be published in the autumn 2020. The survey will give extremely important and timely gender-relevant information on time use during the COVID-19. Finally, I'd like to stress the importance of gender statistics, data analysis, collaboration, and communication. We need to look at data critically from a gender point of view and recognize data gaps. What do statistics tell us? Is the story equal? Collaborating with other data producers, users, and especially decision makers is crucial for finding out data sources, timely needs, and resources, for example. Communicating about gender statistics should not be forgotten either. Only use gender bring information. I see this process as a cycle of data needs, producing and communicating gender statistics and political decisions. Gender statistics matter and can impact on policies and even legislation. Then legislation impacts on statistics, which then help us to produce more equal statistics and thus a more equal society. I tend to say that every statistician should be a gender statistician. I encourage you all to put gender lenses on and look at all data with gender lenses. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjut, for this wonderful and comprehensive presentation. I mean, you're obviously coming from a very data-rich background, and you showed us what can be done, and with all of that information to understand the situation and the living situation of women and families better. So thank you for this presentation, and let's move on. You were talking at one point, Mayud, about the power of data. Now that leads beautifully into the next presentation, which is called the power of granular data, the integration of geospatial information and gender statistics. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, fasten your seat belts, because this last segment of our session is very much focused on geospatial information and georeferencing. So I'll give the floor to Julio to launch us into this direction here.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Stefan. Today, I have 3 reasons to be very happy. The first one is that, of course, we're enjoying this UN World Data Forum, even in a virtual format. The second one is, as Stefan mentioned, today is World Statistics Day. It only comes every 5 years, and today, this year, the theme is connecting the world with data we can trust. And this is also very important in terms of gender statistics. And that's precisely the third reason why I'm happy with the launch of this World's Women 2020 publication and all the data set and the visualizations and everything that Francesca has talked about. I take also the chance to say hi to Francesca, to Mariut, and to Carmel, all from different institutions that I admire. Needless to say, we work very close with Esri, so I really look forward to their own presentation. While I'm trying to share my own presentation, I think you should be able to see it now. Let me say that I'm going to focus on one of the topics that Francesca made an emphasis, which is economic empowerment, and try to cross that with the granular data, or in this case, granularity mostly is referring to geospatial information. So nowadays we have a lot of tools in order to boost the analysis of the different types of statistics. As you remember very clearly, the motto of the Agenda 2020 for Sustainable Development is leave no one behind. And in order to do that, we really need to take the microscope and find every person, and in this case, every woman and girl, in order to make a close analysis on what's the particular status that they are, the situation that they're living in order to make the right decisions, no? So we have to make a lot of cross-sectional analysis, and this is one of the things that we want to do in this example. Now, in terms of our work in Mexico, in EGI, we try to make full use of one of the statistical programs that I have seen a little used before, that are the Economic Census. We in Mexico have Economic Census every 5 years, and the last one was before the pandemic in 2019. And the Economic Census is very important because it allows a lot of information, not only of economic activity and economic structure, but also of different aspects that are also very important for gender statistics, mostly regarding economic empowerment and labor conditions that the women face in these cases. No, so here I have 3 aspects that are important in Economic Census: socioeconomic characteristics of the different activities and people employed in these economic units. Of course, the focus on different populations that are of special interest, such as women and other lagging behind segments of population, and of course, our georeferencing. Just one slide regarding the economic census. The economic census allows for us to make a good characterization of the economic structure of the Mexican economy. So non-farm Mexico is mostly now an industrial economy where almost one of every 3 pesos is coming from industry, either manufacturing or mining. And this has to do, of course, because we're connecting with global value chains, particularly in the North American segment. And of course, within that, we can also see the participation of men and women in payroll, how very gradually, very slowly, women is gaining access, but not as much as we would like to. The reason here, or the point here that I want to make is that macro aggregate variables are important, but not nearly enough in order to see what's going on at the very detailed level. And what I'm going to present is using Tableau, one of the main analyses that we've been doing. I want to make to give thanks to all the INEGI team that has been helping us to do this analysis with Tableau. One of them has to do with visualizing across the country the different economic activities or sectors. When we focus only at the state level, we can show that the north and center of Mexico has a concentration on industrial activities, whereas the south of the country has more commercial type of activities. Of course, we have certain states where tourism is important and it's selected in terms of services. But here it's very important to go at the municipality level. In Mexico, we have more than 2,000 municipalities, and economic activity is very different in terms of urban and rural municipalities, in terms of the location of particular industries such as manufacturing plants, technological parks, or mining activities. So it's very important to go at the lower level, lower granularity, lower geographies. And this is one example, for instance, when we focus on the participation of men and women in payrolls detected by Economic Census. When we see only at the state level, the participation gender gap is not that stark as you could see when you go into the municipality level. Then you can really single out certain municipalities, particularly in the north and in the Gulf of Mexico coast, where mining is very important, and you can have gender gaps of more than 30% for some particular industries. And of course, the reverse is also true when you focus on other types of municipalities where the gender gap is not that stark. But this kind of detail allows us to see all the spectrum of participation gender gaps. So here we have, for instance, in green, municipalities where the gap is focused on one particular segment, mostly on highly concentration on the participation of women, and you can highlight those in green. And then you have on the right-hand side, the other side of the spectrum, where it's mostly concentrated on hiring of men, and also indicate that in our map. Now, the richness of this analysis is that we can cross many different dimensions. We can cross, as it's shown in the left-hand side, by economic activity, by gross value added, to see how much value these kind of activities actually contribute to the economy. We can also see different variables that are important for gender, such as gender participation gap, and of course focus on particular groups that are important, such as indigenous or native population in terms of Mexico. So on the right-hand side, we have a cross analysis of these different types, where we're showing the top 10 municipalities where we have gross value added. In the first, we have two important municipalities in the Gulf of Mexico, Carmen and Paraíso, which is the two municipalities where oil extraction is very important. And then we have a huge gender gap because it's mostly male dominated in terms of activities. On the right-hand side, we have the bottom municipalities in terms of value added, and then we show in red municipalities where we have indigenous population dominating. Gender gaps as not a start, and of course we can identify those in the different maps in order to focus, to close in, zoom in public policies in terms of these things. Of course, using this tool, we can select two different municipalities. One is in the state of Sonora, in the north of Mexico. This municipality, Oquita, it's a backward, it's traditional. And on the right-hand side, we have San Pedro Garza Garcia, which is probably the most advanced municipality in Mexico, in the city, in the neighborhood of Monterrey, in Nuevo León, Mexico City, when you have a huge proportion of value added, huge income levels, and you can basically focus and see the difference in terms of economic empowerment of men and women. For instance, how much in-work training do they have? You can see that in the municipality of Sonora, almost no training is given. We have older labor force, and traditional activities dominate. Whereas in San Pedro Garza Garcia, more in-work training is done. We have a younger population working on, and we are dominated by more modern or connected economic activities. That was just a glimpse of what we can do with this tool and with the economic censuses, but INEGI is also working on other different statistical programs, such as today we released the government censuses, where, as Francesca said, we identify participation of women in government. We're also looking at attendance to school. Next year, we'll have our domestic violence or the violence against women survey in order to find out how we're doing that. And a couple of weeks ago, we released our time use survey in order to focus and try to make evident the contribution of women in terms of unpaid work and care in Mexican society. Let me finalize with some takeaways. Of course, national statistical organizations have the challenge of providing lots of information. And one of them, as Marius said, we statisticians have always to wear our gender statistics hat or the glasses for gender perspective. And it's not only important in the production of statistics to have these lenses, but also in the dissemination of statistics and use very modern or attractive ways of communicating these gender statistics. One of them is using visual displays, a lot of storytelling maps, and where I'm sure Esri is going to show us wonderful things they're doing. And of course, we have to put a package of context for some of these things. In this respect, this World's Women 2020, with 100 stories, it's very important in order to get a close contact with the actual situation that is happening in terms of the lives of women and children. So basically, we have to tell stories that we can relate to. Now, in terms of INEGI, we have the challenge of combining and putting together geospatial information with statistical information in order to make evident the different gender gaps that appear in Mexico. And in this occasion, this day, with the launching of World's Women 2020 in the UN World Data Forum and in the World Statistics Day, we're very happy to put our experience at the use of every other data producer and data user that might be of interest. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julio, and thank you for this very powerful presentation of the importance of geospatial information and the ability to, as you call it, provide granular data. I think we all know, somebody made reference to our SDG agenda, leave no one behind. The statistical translation of this leave no one behind concept is disaggregated and granular data to really understand where everybody, in this case in particular, where women and girls are and what are their living conditions. And I think you've made a powerful presentation, how we can use the marriage, as I always call it, between traditional official statistics and geospatial information to better describe these situations. Well, I mean, who else is in a better position to actually dig in even deeper in the geospatial dimension than our dear friend Carmel from our long-standing partner Esri? I'm very much looking forward to your presentation. What can we do with these powerful technologies to help us to understand, to do statistics even better and understand statistics even better? Carmel, the floor is yours. I think you may still be muted. Yeah.
Yes, okay, now I'm unmuted. Thank you very much, Stefan, and thanks to all the other presenters. It's very exciting to be able to present to you here on World Statistics Day, as was mentioned earlier. It is wonderful to be able to present some of the innovations around the 2020 World's Women Report, and I thank you for the opportunity to do so. So as you've heard probably from many governments and NGOs, that a lot of folks are adopting these policies for open data in order to promote more accountability and transparency for its citizens and beneficiaries, to enable monitoring and evaluation of projects and the status of programs, and perhaps most importantly, to provide accessibility to data so that these valuable assets can be leveraged and utilized by anyone. I found that Canada actually defines open data as a practice that makes machine-readable data freely available, easy to access, and simple to reuse. The 2020 World's Women Report is innovative in that the data is shared via data stories, as mentioned by Francesca and others, where gender narratives are brought to life rather than disseminated via a PDF in a report. It is also innovative in that the actual open data is provided to all. It's not hidden in tables as an annex to a report. Certainly this is a new era of sharing of information by the UN Statistical Division and their partners. And lastly, it's very empowering, as you can use readily available tools to explore, filter, and map the World's Women Report data. There are 6 data sets, as previously mentioned, and I'd like to focus on the last one that is on my list here of economic empowerment for women. And I'd like to share with you a demonstration where we're going to look at a couple of different data layers. We're going to focus on mobile phone ownership by women and looking at the gender gap there. And we're going to also look at access to banking and the internet. These things are particularly important during a time of COVID when there is limited social interaction, and therefore not having access to mobile phones or banking remotely certainly will affect someone's economic empowerment. The 2020 World's Women Report was developed using the ArcGIS Hub technology and its open data capabilities. And I'd like to demonstrate how the open gender data shared by the UN Statistical Division can be utilized beyond the data stories that were synthesized and shared with you. Okay, so I'm going to now go into exploring the data sets so that we can actually start looking and visualizing some of the information. So let's click on the empowerment of women. And you're going to see that there are a number of data sets provided. There's 26 data sets for that specific data set. And I want to explore to see if there are indeed some mobile data sets. And the first one that pops up is a gender gap in mobile phone ownership. So I'm going to click on that and start to explore it a little bit further. And you'll see in here the open data capabilities provide for you an overview with all of the attributes, a sense that 84 countries have actually provided data. So you can actually see the data and which countries have provided it. You can see when it was last updated. You can actually go in and search the data. You can also do some very nice things. Instead of perhaps just looking at the attributes here, you might want to actually see the data table behind this. So you can see that there's the 84 records. and you can go in and you can actually filter the data by country, by specific values, etc. You might, as this is open data, want to use it in another platform. So you can actually download the data in a number of formats. You can download it as a CSV file, a KML, a shape file, a GeoJSON file, or most recently a file geodatabase. Okay? You can also, if you had filtered the data, be able to just download the filtered information. Perhaps you'd like to create a map and just see a little quick overview. Right from this tool, you're able to actually have the data mapped and explore it. The map will come in, it'll be represented as points. You can actually click on one and see the values in the pop-up that are provided. So you can take a look at the data. Here we have a very significant gender gap in mobile phone ownership in the country of Niger at 53.2 women for every 100 men having access to mobile phones or ownership of mobile phones. Perhaps I want to go and explore this information with a little bit more context and involve other data sets. I want to take a look at other types of information and integrate it together. You can create a web map just by clicking on that particular link there to the right on the overview page. And you'll see once again the data is brought up and it's represented as these small symbols. I think I want to symbolize it a little bit differently. I want to symbolize the values, and all these tools are available to you right from the platform. And it's going to give me a sense of, oh, wow, look at the values from -12 to 53. So 53 is perhaps the biggest gender gaps that we're seeing in the world, whereas -12 here in Chile, there's actually more women with mobile phone ownership than there are men. So I'm also going to add another value because I want to be able to see this as a set of symbols. I'm going to look at it both by, I'm going to take a look at it and understand a little bit more about the data. I think I want to, instead of looking at this symbolized as low to high, I want to look at it above and below. And I'm going to change the values here and take a look at the differences. Since so much of the Women's World Report are in these orange tones, I'm going to invert the symbols and take a look at the data this way. Now I can actually see that there's some very significant differences in the gender gap across the world. Let's zoom in a little bit to Asia and Africa, where we're seeing significant changes. Now you will recall earlier I clicked here on Niger and took a look at the data. Because I'm a geographer, I want my data to pop a little bit. I'm going to take a look at finding a base map that's a little more informative. So I'm going to look for data sets that are related to world imagery. And one of them here, the world imagery Firefly, I'm going to use that as my base map. Now I can start to really understand also perhaps a little bit about the physical features in these areas. You certainly see that Niger is in a very desertified area, whereas some of the other countries like Rwanda, Burundi, etc., here are in areas that have more vegetation and so forth, as you can see. So much like a cooking show, I'm going to actually show you a little bit a further baked map that I've created, but you can see that there's a lot of tools readily available for you to utilize. And when I add in other data sets, such as the proportion of women and men 15 years or older with a bank account or other financial institution available to them, or perhaps have mobile money service access, you can actually start seeing some other data sets here. Let's focus once again on Niger. We have here, you can see the proportion of men who have access is 19.94% of the men have access to banking or mobile banking services. And perhaps if you are a donor and you're thinking about how you can improve the situation for women in this area, and you'll see that they only have about half of that at 10.91% of having access to the banking or mobile money services. So if I was looking to increase the opportunity for women to participate in the financial sector and to have banking available to them, and mobile accessibility is very limited here as well. Recall that 53% of the or 53 women for every 100 men have access to a mobile phone, this is maybe a place that I want to make a specific intervention and help bridge that gender gap. I also thought, maybe there's some other interesting SDG data out there, like indicator 17.8.1, which looks at how many internet users are there per 100 inhabitants. Perhaps they have other ways to access internet or mobile banking. So I took a look here, and indeed, you'll see that there, for this particular indicator, it's improved greatly over the last 20 years from 0.04 up to 5.25, but 5.25 is still a very low number for folks, for every 5 people out of every 100 inhabitants having access to the internet. So if I was a donor looking at this open data, I might think to be looking at some of these particular countries and saying to myself, where can I make the greatest impact to realize more economic empowerment of women? And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Carmel. I mean, I almost got a little bit dizzy with these panoramic flight, but it is fascinating what we can do. And I think nowadays, and of course, geospatial information is all about integration, better understanding at the local level what is going on, and better integrating different dimensions of the phenomenon we are looking at. So thank you for taking us through this and whetting our appetite of what we can actually do with this data that we have now all put together, and the technology that, thanks to you and Esri, we can apply to look at this. Okay, these were all fascinating presentations. I didn't want to stop the presenters because, and I know there's so much more to present, it leaves very little time for our discussions, but let's move on. Before we move to the discussion, let me just invite our friend from Colombia, Mr. Juan Daniel Oviedo, to be the first one to make an intervention under the discussion segment, because he has been working with us very, very closely to put this session and this panel and the book together. So please, Juan Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan, and a warm hello to Francesca, Julio, and Carmel. I found the presentations very exciting, and at the same time, we should be conscious that while progress has been made to bridge gender gaps in our societies, there is still tons of things to be done, and this is something that is general around the world. We believe in Colombia that, for example, in our case, social norms, political institutions, economic incentives work together to hinder access to opportunities in many parts of society to girls and women. And as we have seen, to make things more difficult, there is lack of information, or sometimes there is a large share of asymmetric information about conditions and experiences that women and girls face in our modern society. And that's why we are also very happy here in Colombia that today, in the World Statistics Day, we understand that current, reliable, and trusted data are essential facilities to play the role in order to generate consciousness and social awareness about the challenges and the opportunities of gender equality. But mainstreaming, as a National Statistics Office and as a chief statistician, mainstreaming gender statistics is not an end as itself. The what for question is very important. Which are the main questions that we want to solve to do with the information that we are providing to our society? And I believe that at this level, the national statistics systems should allow for interdisciplinary dialogues. For example, as you were mentioning, the integration between statistical information and geospatial information is a very productive marriage. But we need interdisciplinary marriages also and dialogues between the national or inside the national statistics systems in order to orientate data production and data dissemination, as Julio was mentioning, toward achieving those goals of finding how are we going to make society conscious about the importance of gender equality in the socioeconomic and environmental development. We understand in Colombia that those questions, which are very important, if they are answered using current but alternative sources of information, could allow our society to be more sensitive to the gender opportunities of development in our countries. That's why how to make sustainability, resilience, productivity, employability, and the fight against poverty to take into account gender disparities in something very important. And that's why we believe in Colombia that national statistics offices and national statistics systems, we do not have only a technical responsibility or a statistical responsibility, but also a social and a moral responsibility to allow these dialogues to happen and to orientate the mainstreaming of gender statistics production in those objectives. I consider that this is something very important, and this is, I think, the opportunity for national statistics systems to work towards becoming stewards and to allow innovation in order to become or to allow the household surveys, time use surveys, administrative records, and mobile information, as we were seeing with Carmel, and some other alternative sources of information to be integrated and to allow society to be conscious about the importance of this topic. And that's why, even though my short experience in a statistical environment and being conscious that this is something very important, we believe in Colombia that this is something very important that should be communicated and should be appropriated by society. And that's why I'm also very happy to say that being conscious of the importance of this topic, the chief statistician of Colombia considers himself a feminist and considers that this is something very important, as Margaret was mentioning, that we should be also gender statisticians in order to allow this problem to be tackled by the main challenges of development in the 2030 agenda and to leave neither girls nor women behind of the main challenges of development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juan Daniel, and thank you for reminding us of what you call not only our technical responsibility, but our social responsibility. So, I mean, as I said, we had these fascinating presentations, and unfortunately, we are running a little bit out of time with the questions and comments. We did get quite a number, and I'm sure these conversations will go on, and not only on this platform. We are certainly very happy to hear from all of you what you think about our new product. And there will be other platforms where we can have the discussion on gender statistics and our World's Women 2020 in particular. I'm very grateful that many of you have sent us very encouraging, and Leslie, I have Amelie, Shada, hello Shada, Laura, Dieudonné, all of you sent nice words about our publication. Noor, I hear this is very encouraging for us. We had one question from Stephanie going in the direction how we could integrate gender segregated data with other dimensions. And I think she mentions in particular his age, disability status, migration status, sexual orientation. And so the fundamental questions, how we even can drill down deeper or integrate data sources even a bit more. And perhaps I can just give the floor to Francesca, and she can address this particular question in a little bit.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you, Stephanie, for an interesting question. I think that by integrating as much as possible all available data sources, we can really enrich the information and make a better assessment of the status of women and men. And of course, also zooming in into different subgroups of the population. I think you mentioned migrants, you mentioned older persons and youth. And I believe that the portal that we have prepared and the wealth of information that is all georeferenced will be really the basis for us for the future of the portal and how we are planning to further develop it using the georeference data as the layer on top of which we will add all the additional indicators as Carmel nicely showcased it. So I didn't have the time to show you that we actually have information for persons with disabilities. We have information for migrants. We also zoom in. A lot of stories cover youth and older persons. Of course, based on national or country level data, because this is a global assessment and regional assessment. But we also have, for the first time, stories written directly by our member states, like Mexico, like Colombia, and like many others. And that's the additional beauty, I would say, of the World Women 2020, because through the georeference data, we can really zoom in at the lower geographical levels, and we can bridge better all the available data sources with the common location. So yes, I think I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just got from the central offices here. We can go over a few more minutes, and perhaps I just would like to pick up on that last topic a little bit, which is the integration. It's all about integration of all the gender-related data, all the vulnerable groups, and in terms of statistical. Technical translation, that means how do we put administrative records, other non-official data, perhaps big data together, geospatial data, and the classical survey census-based official data, and perhaps I cannot resist giving the floor to Julio. Perhaps as a chief statistician, you must be thinking about these things a lot, and so because it also goes into the question of data governance. How can we bring the various data providers to work together? The data providers that are sitting here around the table and watching us, because this is the World Data Forum. I mean, I guess there are a lot of alternative data providers also out there and users. How can we work better together? Julio.
Thank you for the question, Stefan. It's very important that national statistical offices across the world have a leadership role as stewards of the data ecosystems in different countries and interact with each other across the world. The idea is that we should have common standards, common classifications, and common methodologies in order for the data to be interoperable. That's interoperability is the key question that allows to make these cross sections across different domains. For instance, as Carmel showed us with the ownership of mobile phones, we need from the start to have ownership identified by sex. So these kinds of elements are important at the design of the collection of the data, with a mindset from the beginning that this will be crossed with other domains and other possibilities. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that insight. I'm wondering whether Marjut or Carmel, you want to add from your perspectives a little bit to this discussion. If you have, please. Marjut, do you have any from, I know from Finland's experience, you have very strong administrative data, and you were several times making references to registers. So I think you are very familiar also with bringing these various data sources together.
Yes, absolutely. It's important, and it's crucial to have these information in registers, and then we can combine to survey data. And of course, it's important, but it's important in surveys to mention what to the respondents what are the uses of the data. So otherwise it's not possible to combine the data if we don't let the respondents to know what the data is used for. And then of course we have to think about the new possible data. There are a lot of data available, but we need to think about those and keep everything on mind all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Stefan, I just wanted to add as well that in addition to being able to see all the interesting patterns and trends like Marjut's research has shown, and it is really important to have that disaggregated or granular data that Julio showed in his presentation. If you have that really localized information and geographic boundaries and administrative units, you're able to then bring the data to that level for decision making. And all these development interventions really have to happen at those local levels to make an impact and to really bridge the gender divide that exists. So being able to empower the data with the geography, I think, is really important.
I think this is a wonderful closing remark. I mean, also you are pointing out that decision making and policy is happening at different levels. It's not only, we often very much think about the central government and the big heads of states, but the real situation of people on the ground and women in particular. I mean, where they work, how they go to move around in their villages and places, what the education situation is, or what the health services are. That is happening at the local level. So data are really from the local to the regional, national, continental, global level. There are so many differences. And of course, geography has helped us to better understand how data at all of these different geographical levels can actually reach the decision makers and make an impact. So on that note, we ran over a little bit, but I think we still have a lot to discuss, and I'm sure this is going to happen in many fora outside this particular platform. Let me just inform you, we have, Francesca and I, we have the pleasant duty to go to the Secretary General's noon briefing in about 40 minutes or so. And so as the main news out of the UN machine today, there will be also a reference to the world's women at the very highest level from the Secretary General's office. So we will be able to mention this with our boss, the Undersecretary General, Mr. Lear, launch the world's women at the press briefing of the Secretary General. I want to thank everybody, the wonderful panel that I had here, wonderful presentations highlighting so many different dimensions of this topic. Thank everybody around the table who was listening to us. I hear there were many participants connected, and then I can only encourage you to do two things for the rest of the day. Number one is dig into this wonderful publication. As you could see, there is a lot of ways to do that and a lot of fun to be had. And then celebrate, because it is, after all, World Statistics Day. So happy World Statistics Day. Thank you to everybody. Bye. Well, I think we are offline. So it's I hope so. I mean, if not, the rest will